Captain Ross, is this your final word?
No, Excellency. It's true we Americans don't know very much about you Japanese, and never did. And now I realize you know even less about us. You can kill us. All of us are part of us. But if you think that's going to put the fear of God into the United States of America and stop them from sending other flyers to bomb you, you're wrong, dead wrong. They'll come by night and they'll come by day, thousands of them. They'll blacken your skies and burn your cities to the ground and make you get down on your knees and beg for mercy. This is your war. You wanted it. You asked for it. You started it. And now you're going to get it. And it won't be finished until your dirty little empire is wiped off the face of the earth.
Good evening, one and all. That's Dana Andrews from Purple Hearts, opening up tonight's movie program, the one and only movie program. And it's from Public Radio, KCBX, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara counties. Take Two, the movie program. Across the aisle from me is the person we call the Commander-in-Chief of Cinema. It's Bob Whiteford.
At ease, Jim. And across the aisle from me, praying for civilian, private first class, well, the Admiral, the First Lord of the Admiralty of Cinema on the Central Coast, the incomparable gentleman Jim Dee.
Hey, Bob.
How you, Jimmy?
Boy, well,
that's a slam bang beginning to a show.
Yeah. Well,
and that's the subject of tonight's show, folks, war movies. And there's all different types of them. There's ones like we just heard now where it's like, let's go get them. And there's other types that, are more shades of gray. But we're going to get into that a little deeper tonight. We're going to do a thumbnail sketch of the genre, and we'll be hearing from you all out there a little later in the show with some of your impressions on war films.
You know, Bob, I guess it's the three-letter word that's on the minds of all Americans, the minds of people of the world, and for better or for worse, whatever the opinion is war seems to be the topic of the day. And it's if we're on a movie program, but the folks over the weekend chose to go to Steve Martin's Bringing Down the House, and maybe they wanted to get away from the war. A comedy, it's his biggest opening yet. So congratulations to Steve. People wanted to see a comedy this weekend, but tonight, as Bob mentioned, an overview of some really interesting films that we can offer to you to perhaps take a look at. You got the TV remote control, you hear these snippets, you hear this word, you have concepts in your mind, but there's some fabulous films that are timely watching, I would say.
What's interesting about this clip that we just heard, I mean, this is a very emotional clip. The Purple Heart, a film that, let's face it, it hasn't aged well at all. Came out in 1944, and a lot of audiences then, like now, very similar, wanted to get away from this stuff. They were catching a Betty Hutton movie or a Hope and Crosby Road to Somewhere film. And, Hollywood had to come up with a film to kind of get people stirred up. And this is an example of that type of film. There were a lot of those produced during World War II where, the hero has his moment to tell off the Japanese or the Germans before we do them in, or in this case, they do us in. And that was kind of endemic of that type of film. Because remember, I think we talked about this a while back, how the film industry was considered a critical part of America's defense, like the plants that made planes and tanks. And the Dream Factory was producing movies like this, The Purple Heart, which is a prime example of that kind of, war film. Incidentally, this is kind of interesting. This film, which was very much I guess a pro-war film would be a flag waver, was made by Louis Millstone, who made perhaps the greatest anti-war film ever made, the original All Quiet on the Western Front. And that's part of, I think, our discussion tonight, too, is how over time people's or our culture's mores on war change, and it's reflected in cinema. Like in the 30s, early 30s, World War I was such a bloody debacle. I think we were talking about this fairly recently, too, how the films, for the most part, reflected a very cynical anti-war bent, which All Quiet on the Western Front certainly had. Wings, which also won an Academy Award, had that as well. And now here we are in World War II. Suddenly the films are all, and these are all films made during wartime. And this is something, another subtext to take note of, what this reflects. Because the next film that we got a little clip from came out in 1945. In fact, the next two came out in 1945. And the war is winding down at this point. And this film that we're about to play a clip from, it's called The Story of G.I. Joe. It was directed by Bill Wellman, one of the great filmmakers in Hollywood, and it made Robert Mitchum a big star. In fact, he got an Academy Award nomination for this film. This took him out of the Hopalong Cassidy films into his superstar status, which he enjoys till this day. Hank, can we roll that clip?
Names, Jesus. I've been pulling old names out, putting new names in. You know, you're not the only writer on this outfit. I've been writing too. Jones, Peterson, McCarthy, Spadovsky, Smith. Dear Mrs. Smith, your son died bravely today on the... And the new kids that come up. That's what gets you. The new ones. Some of them just got a little fuzz on their faces. They don't know what it's all about. Scared to death. I know it ain't my fault they get killed, but that's how I feel like a murderer. I hate to look at them, the new kids. Here, drink up, Ernie. Here's to Fight Pass, Gila Beach, Salerno, Oran.
You know, I think it's interesting, Bob, in this clip, Robert Mitchum from The Story of G.I. Joe, here's a film from the perspective of the soldier. And we're going to be getting into perspectives from, you know, the top brass. But check out some of these films like Story of G.I. Joe, and you can kind of put yourself, as much as you can in your, you know, your living room and your couch watching a movie, but what it's like to be there with the khakis on and being a soldier and losing your friends, as Robert Mitchum's talking about in this clip, how he's faced with death daily and the compassion that he now has for the young soldiers coming in, wet behind the ears. You
know what's really interesting about this film, Jim? Came out in 1945. The release, I wouldn't doubt, was held up till the issue was over, because even though this film was made during the war, even though it has some of that flag-waving element to it, there's several scenes in this film, this is one, where you're getting a sense of realism. There's another scene where Mitchum and another GI take on some German snipers in a church, and how the other soldier, sergeant, after they've dispatched them, you know, how he just turns to Mitchum and says, "I can't believe we're doing this here." And then you turn around through the rubble and you see the cross and the crucifix, and then you realize this pile of rubble was a church. And the way the movie ends, with Mitchum dead at the roadside, and there's no glory, it's all his men just going off to take the next hill and probably die. Great film.
Yeah, you know, whatever opinion you think, for better or for worse, war is Messy business. Messy.
And it does make for some interesting films. And this is one that was hidden for years. Only recently has been made available again. And it's a classic.
It's the story of G.I. Joe with Robert Mitchum. And that was from 1945, you said?
Correct.
Yeah. Well, Bob, you want to get into our next selection?
Well, I have to talk about this film, too. This was also made in the summer. It was released in the summer of 1945, though I believe it was made earlier. And I would say, along with the story of G.I. Joe, this film, called A Walk in the Sun, these are probably the two best movies that were made during World War II. They actually... there's a lot of this why we fight stuff, but this film, again, told from the perspective of the guys that have to do the fighting. And it's a lot of hurry up and wait. And while they're waiting, a lot of, GIs are a lot going through their minds over all kinds of things. Also, what's interesting about this film, the concept of the faceless enemy. You never see a German's face in this film, ever. You see the back of their heads, you see their hands, you see soldiers die who are shot by them. And what's interesting about this film, too, is Americans are scared. One sergeant who's in charge, he cracks up and starts crying. He's played by Herb Rudley. And I guess he did such a good job, it landed him on that show from the 60s called The Mothers-in-Law with Kay Ballard and Eve Arden and Roger C. Carmel. But that's another story. Here's a clip from the film Walk in the Sun with the great Richard Conte.
Nobody died. How's the ammo?
It's been worse and it's been better.
Klein really cut himself a piece of cake. Hey, Friedman, what's this mean? 5 minutes after going upfield on dock. I don't get it.
Let me see the note. Oh, I get it. It means that 5 minutes after he blows his whistle, they're going up the field. He wants us to go to work 15 seconds before.
Oh, is that it? Suppose he'll give me money for overtime?
Sure.
That's a tricky business.
Looks like we'll be getting a new platoon pretty soon.
Mary and Joseph, there's a lot of good men going down in this war. Why don't they let us alone? I wish I had every Nazi right in the palm of my hand. I'd crush them to a pulp. Why don't they let us alone?
You catch on slow, Rivera, but you catch on good.
Yeah.
Yep.
When you're in war, you catch on slow, but you catch on good.
Or else.
Yeah.
Boy. And that's Louis Millstone again.
Wow. Strikes
again with this one definitely more akin to All Quiet on the Western Front. Although, it doesn't really have an anti-war aspect to it. There's an air of realism, especially how the characters interplay with each other. Very well done film. Starred Dana Andrews as the lead, as he was in The Purple Heart. A perfect lead for World War II movies. Lloyd Bridges is in this. Richard Conte, he hung with the Rat Pack. He was in Ocean's 11. Hunts Hall, one of my heroes, is in this as well. John Ireland. A great cast filled with types. You've got your Jewish guy, you got some Italian guys, you got your farm boy, your city slickers. That's part of the genre as it was then.
Yes. I love this next clip, though. The film is Battleground, and Bob, you can talk about it. But I listen closely to this clip. It's from the film Battleground, and it has the elements of America, but the fear that is present in this scene. You want to talk about this?
Oh, sure. Okay. This came out in 1949. It was produced by MGM, directed again by Bill Wellman, arguably his greatest film. And for folks out there who saw the excellent HBO series Band of Brothers about the paratroopers in World War II, cinematically speaking, this film, Battleground, is its grandfather. If you've never seen this film, you'll see there's some similarity, and that's why I think it's important to bring up some of these relics, because I think they have a lot to, they're emulated for a lot of different reasons. And this film is interesting because it's made 4 years after the war. It was written by Robert Pirosh, who went on to write Hell is for Heroes with Steve McQueen, Fess Parker, Nick Adams, James Coburn, Bobby Darin, Harry Gordino. You get the drift. That's a great war movie, too. But this is written by a guy who was there. And we're a few years removed from the war, so they have a little more freedom to tell it like it was. And I think this scene where Van Johnson, in arguably his greatest performance, Van Johnson, underappreciated actor, he's very good in this. He's great. Van Johnson, John Hodiak, and Ricardo Montalban are manning a roadblock, and a Jeep comes up filled with Americans, and both groups are not sure if these are Germans impersonating Americans, because if you remember during the Battle of the Bulge, the Germans dropped commandos that were dressed up like Americans and spoke English perfectly to cause confusion. This is the confusion.
What's the password?
Texas. Keep them covered. They may be German.
Any line on these woods, Major?
I didn't hear the countersign.
Oh, Liga. Texas Liga.
Will this road take us to 3rd Bat headquarters?
Straight ahead.
Get going.
Just a minute. What is a Texas Liga, Major?
How's that?
I said, what's a Texas Liga?
It's some kind of baseball term.
What kind?
A safe hit just over the head of the infield.
Nobody asked you. How'd the Dodgers make out this year?
Hey, who's your commanding officer, soldier?
Whoever he is, he knows how the Dodgers made out.
Let's see your dog tags.
What?
Come on, we're not taking any chances.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
Hey, what is this?
Was ist dein Name?
What kind of nonsense?
Schnell, schnell, Name, sprechen Sie.
Drop those rifles.
You. Who's Betty Grable going with?
Cesar Romero.
Shut up. Who's the dragon lady?
She's in Terry and the Pirates.
What's a hot rod?
The hopped up jalopy.
Hello, Joe. What do you know?
Just got back from a vaudeville show. I guess they're okay.
Thank you, Sergeant.
A PFC, Major. Praying for civilian. That's why I believe in being careful. May I suggest, sir, that you study up on baseball?
Yeah, I guess I'd better. And by the way, you might tell your buddy that Cesar Romero is out. She's married to Harry James.
Boy, Bob, that's a great clip from Battleground. And what's great about that scene is it's so entertaining, and it's almost like you're laughing, but you're kind of laughing nervously because the whole undercurrent is fear and mistrust, and one of those elements of war where here's my American buddy, but is he going to betray me here? Or is this really a German in disguise?
Yeah, everyone gets the feeling that someone could pull the trigger at any second.
Yes.
And what's interesting about this, too, is it's almost like America, since the World War II to present, our 1-2 punch. Not just our military might, maybe that's like our right, but our left hook is our popular culture.
Yes.
And this seems to permeate the canvas of the war film, too. And this film is a great film. No matter what you feel about war, this is a classic film, highly recommended. It's one of the great films from Hollywood, the golden era of the studio system, the waning days of the studio system. Highly recommended.
That's Battleground. This is Public Radio, KCBX. It's the movie program Take Two, and we're talking about war movies, all many different ramifications, and we'll take your phone calls a little bit later on in the hour, but we're going to continue now. Segue from we're going to move into the arena of the top brass, the inner workings of the machinations of what war is all about, and when shall we say, the high command is somewhat questionable. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things of war where it's, we are imperfect, and in the arena of war, it seems like the imperfections can come out, and the major questions of, is the leader blowing it?
That brings us to perhaps one of the great gems of the genre, kind of the turning point in the genre. Because, we have the Korean War right after World War II, and cinematically speaking, it looks like a World War II movie, but it plays more like Vietnam. And I think of films like Retreat Hell with Frank Lovejoy and Richard Carlson, Rusty Tamblyn. I like that one a lot. I also 1 Minute to Zero with Robert Mitchum and Charles McGraw. You might remember a story a couple of years ago came out about how GIs had shot at Korean civilians because basically there was refugees retreating south, trying to get behind the UN lines, and North Korean infiltrators were inside these groups of civilians, and we had to shoot at them because, we couldn't find out that North Koreans were in this group. And that actually, it's in this Mitchum movie called 1 Minute to Zero from 1952, which is kind of interesting. But see, there's a change. There's a sea change here in the genre. And in 1956, a director who is, I think, one of the great American filmmakers who has never gotten the full respect he deserves, Robert Aldrich, changes the rules with the war movie. And the film I'm talking about is a little gem called Attack, and it stars Jack Palance, Lee Marvin, Eddie Albert in probably his greatest performance. He is fantastic as the psychotic, unfit commander, Erskine Cooney. And this is a different kind of film, Jim, because here's the war within the war. We see the enemy, they're us. Our commander is killing more of us than the Germans are. It's almost like the Citizen Kane of fragging movies. And what's interesting about this one, folks, is because it's playing by a whole set of rules that are different, the Defense Department didn't want to assist in the production of this film, which is kind of interesting as well. It's something that would become more and more commonplace later on. That trend would change with Black Hawk Down, and I think The Longest Day. There's a few others, but we'll talk about that later. This is an interesting scene where, let me set the table here. Eddie Albert, who plays Captain Cooney, who is psychotic, he's unfit for command, but he is in command because the colonel above him, portrayed by Lee Marvin in a great performance, has put him in a position of power to please Albert's politically powerful father back home. Lee is starting to realize that he is so incompetent that not only is he getting his own men killed, but he might lose the battle at the critical moment, and Lee would be in a lot of hot water. So let's roll that bit from Attack, Hank.
Face up to a couple of facts. It's facts I'm
talking about. What the hell is going on here?
Clyde! They're hitting us with tanks, Clyde.
Don't you Clyde me.
Colonel, I'm sorry.
You're sorry. You're sorry, all right. Now, why are you still here? Why aren't you and your company up ahead in Linnell?
I tried, Clyde.
I tried, Clyde. Just what does that mean?
I sent a whole platoon in.
A whole platoon? That's 40 men. You got 200 men in this company, so you sent in a whole platoon?
They got
so
in
what happened?
They got in all right, Clyde, but they pulled out. I told them to stay.
All right, how many got in?
5. 3 got out.
I told them to stay,
Well,
Clyde.
of course they pulled out. Who wouldn't? How many casualties?
About 10. 5 dead. Lieutenant Costa's missing.
Costa? Well, I wouldn't worry about him. He got 9 lives.
We did get the drop on him, Clyde, but I spotted those tanks out there. If it hadn't been for those tanks, I was all set to go into with the rest of the company. I was feeling them out with Costa's platoon.
Your orders were to get your company in there. Regiment thought you were in there. General Parsons thought you were in there. You know why? Because I told him you were in there.
But, Clyde, I told them...
What are you figuring on doing now? Pulling out?
You can't hold that armor off.
You can't. You're gonna. You're gonna stick right here and hold. How many tanks you figure?
Prisoner said there's all kinds of mechanized stuff in there.
All right, there's a task force on its way from 10th Armored. If the Krauts get through here and take that crossroad, the whole battalion gets it. Now your job is to hold until you're relieved. Clear?
You have any idea how long this will take?
An hour, maybe 2, but I don't care if it takes a week. I want this position held.
What a great scene.
Wow. And again, the whole hierarchy of the commanders imploding. Here's a guy who was just wreaking so much havoc that
through his incompetence,
yes,
and psychosis. I mean, there's great scenes in this film where Albert just goes completely to pieces, and I mean, he would reprise this role in a sense a few years later in Captain Newman, M.D., a film Gregory Peck made with Bobby Darin, who was also terrific in it, Tony Curtis, Angie Dickinson, Robert Duvall was in that as well. And Eddie Albert, along with some of these other actors, played like GIs who had shell shock and other trauma from combat, and how Gregory Peck would try to cure them and basically send them back to the meat grinder. But this is a fascinating film. This takes it to a different level. It's not black and white anymore. We're actually into shades of gray. And what's interesting also in a historical sense about this confrontation in this scene, these are two men that were in war for real. Lee Marvin, his first acting job was at Okinawa in 1945, pretending he was dead when the Japanese went around bayoneting Marines that they thought might still be alive. And Eddie Albert was at Tarawa in November of 1943. He commanded what they called an Amtrak, which isn't the train. It was actually like an amphibious tank that carried troops, a landing craft. And what happened at Tarawa was they misread the tide charts, and Albert got stuck on a coral reef in one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War. Also, Ed Wood, Plan 9 from Outer Space, was at Tarawa as well. And rumor has it he was wearing women's underwear under his uniform.
Well, Bob, what I find so interesting about this turning point, like you said, is a mantra that is said now, like supporting the troops. But then you think of the soldiers who would die for freedom, for a cause, and yet their commander is questionable, or the commander is using them as pawns, as we're going to get into some more clips of some great films with that kind of a dynamic. And that's where that gray area is so worthy of exploration, just looking at the dynamic of the soldier being put into this, well, you're in an unnatural situation with perhaps a commander who's not making the right choices. That's a tough one.
Mentally unstable.
Ooh, boy.
Heavy.
This is Public Radio, KCBX San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties. It's the movie program, Take Two. Bob Whiteford is with me. I'm Jim Dee, and we're going to get some clips from the top brass on our war movie program right after we go to the concession stand.
I want to go to the movie show, me and my baby. Come on, let's go. On to the movie show. Let's go. I buy the popcorn as soon as we hit the door. My two brothers, Bill and Pons, sitting in the front row. They bought the candy. We don't need nothing more. I love a movie show, I tell you, in black and white. I don't care what it is. I don't care how small the theater is. I don't care who's playing. I don't care how long they got popcorn and candy bars. Butterfly McQueen, she's gone with the wind. I love the film of Anthony Quinn. The creature from the Black Lagoon, Red River, Color Purple. I love the movies. Clark Gable, all the women out there.
And we love the movies. We're back on Take Two, the movie program on KCBX, and we're talking war movies. And we've gone from more the perspective of the soldier depicted in some classics, moving into the 50s, where there's a bit of a shift. And now we're going to be exploring and listening to some really fascinating clips from films that question the whole chain of command. And one of our first films, Stanley Kubrick's incredible Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas. And just a classic film in the fact that here are generals really using the soldiers as pawns in a very intricate yet, well, how would you describe Paths of Glory?
Well, it's based on historical fact, Jim. What happened in 1917 was basically there was a mutiny in the French army. The soldiers in the trenches were led by the French general staff was pretty much incompetent. And what they were into was political grandstanding and whatnot. And the regular soldiers were getting clobbered. And they just gotten to a point where they were just ready to say, you know what? I need a chance. I mean, I don't have a chance here. It's kind of like what the other movie, Attack, was alluding to. It's like, we don't have a chance. It's bad enough we have to fight the enemy and die, but our leaders are slaughtering us. And this film, Kubrick's classic, came out in 1957, and believe it or not, folks, it was so hot back then in terms of controversy, I don't think it's ever really been released in France. If it has, it was years later. They actually banned this film. And this was an incident that at the time of its release happened 40 years before. And I guess this deals with a failed attack on a German position that basically was doomed from the onset. There was no chance for this to succeed, even in the planning stages. And then it turns into this, cover your ass kind of deal where everybody's trying to deflect responsibility, and ultimately it's thrown right back onto the regular soldiers, the grunts, the infantrymen, who just got slaughtered in this stupid attack.
And there's three men who are the essential scapegoats to take the blame for the general's incompetence. And what's also fascinating about this clip, this is Kirk Douglas talking to one of the generals, and
portrayed by Adolphe Menjou.
Oh, yes, and he's very good in this. But what's great to listen to in this is this cavalier attitude, this general who is above it all and actually calls soldiers children. Here's a clip from Paths of Glory.
Just apologize for not inviting you to join the party downstairs tonight, but I'm afraid that it's a dress affair.
Thank you, sir, but I must confess that this is not entirely a social visit.
Oh, come, Dax, let's not go over all that ground again. Though I must admit that, judging from the casualties, the efforts of your regiment must have been considerable.
How can you understand that and allow these men to be shot tomorrow?
Oh, come, Colonel, you're choosing to take a rather simple view of this thing.
The attack was impossible from the start. The general staff must have known that.
Colonel Dax, we think we're doing a good job running the war. You must be aware of the fact that the general staff is subject to all kinds of unfair pressures from newspapers and politicians. Maybe the attack against the anthill was impossible. Perhaps it was an error of judgment on our part. On the other hand, if your men had been a little more daring, they might have taken it. Who knows? In any case, why should we have to bear any more criticism of the failure than we have to? Aside from the inescapable fact that a good many of your men never left the trenches, there's the question of the troops' morale. Don't forget that.
The troops' morale?
Certainly. These executions will be a perfect tonic for the entire division. There are few things more fundamentally encouraging and stimulating than seeing someone else die.
I never thought of that, sir.
Well, you see, Colonel, troops are like children. Just as a child wants his father to be firm, troops crave discipline.
I see.
And one way to maintain discipline is to shoot a man now and then.
May I ask, do you sincerely believe all the things you've just said?
It's been a pleasure discussing this with you, Colonel, but I'm afraid that I'd better be getting back to my guests.
Forgive me for having kept you from your party.
Wow.
Gosh, that general's got it tough. You know,
Yeah,
all that pressure from the politicians and the newspapers, and
Yeah.
he's got to get back to his party.
What I love about that scene, Bob, is when Kirk Douglas essentially asks for the truth, because here is pretty much by the numbers. Oh, our men like us. You know, they like. You know, it's good for them to see a man get killed now and again, and just a very cavalier, detached attitude. And then when Kirk Douglas, says, "Do you really believe what you're saying?" That's the end of the meeting.
It's amazing. I mean, here is a general saying that the soldiers who, incidentally, folks, if you haven't seen the film, picked at random to be shot, and how that a little death would stimulate him. What I'm wondering is, like, what does he think's going on in the trenches? They're dying every day by the bushel. And here's this martinet in the rear with the gear making these kind of statements. If I had a general like that, I'd mutiny too. I don't blame the French at all.
Oh, boy.
I'm sure they would have rather have taken on their generals, and rightfully so at that point.
Yeah. It's a great war film. It's Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas. Highly recommended. Anytime to see that film.
Absolutely, especially where Kirk lets him have it at the end and calls him a degenerate. It's a great film.
Yeah, a lot of power there in his performance. We're going to stick in the same category right now with a really incredible war film that is. I would recommend this as viewing for right now. It really gets into the inner workings of the strangeness of war. And here we go in another case where 3 men are being sacrificed as a scapegoat. And you'll hear why as the top brass talk about 3 soldiers who must go before the firing squad in Breaker Morant.
It seems quite simple to me. I don't know how it's come to this. You said our fellow there, that damned Irishman there...
Captain Taylor, sir. Anglo-Irish.
Taylor, yes, Taylor. Assured you the case against the Australians was overwhelming. Now he seems to spend most of his time giving evidence on their behalf.
Certain proprieties have to be observed, sir. And Taylor fought with Morant. It creates a bond. I don't think he's the problem. Major Thomas is putting up an unexpectedly good defense. 2 of the court members are showing some sympathy for the Australians.
I dare say it's too late to transfer them to India.
I did mention at one time, sir, the complexities of charging soldiers with murder while they're actually in the field.
Good God, Johnny, I'm not trying to prove some academic point. I'm trying to put an end to this useless war. The war leaders must see in this court-martial a demonstration of our impartial justice. If these 3 Australians have to be sacrificed to help bring about a peace conference, small price to pay.
I quite agree, sir, though I doubt the Australians shared our enthusiasm.
That's a clip from Breaker Morant. Bruce Beresford's film director. You know, I think of this film and Tender Mercies as his 2 greatest achievements. And this film plays extremely well right now. As far as it's just a gripping, almost. Also, it gives you insight into what a military tribunal is. We've heard that, currently. It's a current item in the news about these combatants that are part of the war on terror not getting a regular type of trial. And if you want to get a little insight into what a military or trial or military tribunal is, Breaker Morant is a great film to show that. Paths of Glory as well.
Oh, absolutely. Also thinking about films with great military tribunals, The Rack with Paul Newman, Time Limit with Richard Widmark and Carl Malden. Those both dealt with Korean prisoner of war issues, trials of Americans that allegedly collaborated behind the wire. And in both cases, those films, like this film, Breaker Morant, which is one of the all-time greats, they kind of go into a gray area. War, it's just not black and white anymore.
And no character is black and white. I mean, we have a couple more clips from Breaker Morant, and then we'll open up the phone lines. What's very interesting in Breaker Morant is it asks the tough questions. It asks the questions, why would a soldier in the field who is the job is to kill the enemy, but then under certain circumstances, you're brought to trial for murdering. I mean, there's all this gray area and these the fuzzy commands, and the laws in the field are they just don't make any sense, let's just say. Just to set up this next scene, this is a great scene from Breaker Morant. The three men in question are going to trial for the murder of a missionary. And they've also deflected in the fact that Brian Brown was actually rendezvousing with some women to sort of get him off the hook. In this scene, the three of them are talking, and the younger member of the group is actually wondering who killed the missionary. And here we find out also the nature of this war.
Who do you think did kill the missionary?
Me.
What about your lady friends?
That was later.
Does Major Thomas know?
No. He's not going to.
But we've always told the truth. Major Thomas has been pleading justifying circumstances, and now we're just lying.
We're lying! What about them? It's no bloody secret our graves were dug the day they arrested us at Fort Edward.
Yeah, but killing a missionary, Peter...
It's a new kind of war, George. It's a new war for a new century. I suppose this is the first time the enemy hasn't been in uniform. They're farmers. They're people from small towns. They shoot at us from houses and from paddocks. Some of them are women, some of them are children, and some of them are missionaries.
And as you were saying, Bob, this film is probably the first, this war, the Boer War, was the first guerrilla war.
Along with probably the American Revolution, as I'm thinking about it, but certainly in the modern context, yeah, this is the first guerrilla war, a large Western army fighting several thousand irregulars. In fact, that's where the word commando comes from. It's from the Boer language, and what a commando was back then was someone who lived off the land, rode in horseback, and were like raiders. The British eventually assimilated the term commando for fellows who'd fight behind the lines against Jerry and all that sort of rot. But this is what's kind of interesting about this film. It's talking about the new kind of wars. We're seeing this more and more, especially in the latter part of the 20th century. These type of almost like counterinsurgency wars.
And we have one more clip from Breaker Morant, and then we'll get to your phone calls. And what I find fascinating about this clip is it's near the end of the trial, and no matter what we're talking about, those early films coming into Breaker Morant, even into some of the current films, war changes people. It does something. And here's a clip from Breaker Morant, an eloquent elaboration on what war does to men.
Lieutenant Morant shot no prisoners before the death of Captain Hunt. He then changed a good deal and adopted the sternest possible measures against the enemy. Yet there is no evidence to suggest that Lieutenant Morant has an intrinsically barbarous nature. On the contrary. The fact of the matter is that war changes men's natures. The barbarities of war are seldom committed by abnormal men. The tragedy of war is that these horrors are committed by normal men in abnormal situations. Situations in which the ebb and flow of everyday life have departed and have been replaced by a constant round of fear and anger, blood and death.
Yes.
That about sums it up.
Yeah. And Bob, I was thinking as I was just listening to that clip that even coming back from a war where you're intact, maybe intact. I think of the best years of our lives where these men are returning from war And despite them being in, okay shape pretty much, the nuances, there's changes there. And in that film, The Best Years of Our Lives, I highly recommend of looking at those subtle nuances of
Absolutely.
the changes that war brings on.
It's funny, getting back to Band of Brothers for a moment, they had interviews with the actual fellows who were there, and one of the gents said that, there were guys that got shot, guys that got killed. Everybody who came home was a casualty.
Wow.
He acknowledged that, how he never talked about it for 30 years, or 40 years, and then finally it just broke through.
Wow.
Interesting.
You're listening to the movie program on KCBX, Take Two. We'd love to hear from you on our subject tonight of war films. It's 549-8855, 1-800-549-8855. Give us your name and where you're calling from. Good evening, you're on Take Two.
Yeah, hello, this is Jose from SLO.
Hi, Jose.
Hey, well, I've always been interested in war movies ever since I was a little kid, just because, especially World War II, just because it's such a cataclysmic event in, human history. I mean, it was fought on all different fronts and all different theaters, and just pretty much. It was a world war in the truest sense. Everybody was pretty much involved in it in some capacity or another, and it affected just about everybody. But I have to disagree with you about Van Johnson's best war movie. I always considered Chain Mutiny probably his best one.
Okay.
Fabulous film.
Okay. I'll tell you what. I'll concede to you. It's a tie. How's that?
Yeah, well, I saw the other one too, Battleground. That was an excellent movie too. But I don't know, for some reason, King Mutiny has always been on the top of my war list.
Oh, what
yeah,
a
that's
film.
a great film. Bogart. And you know who really drove that? I loved the scene at the end where Jose Ferrer.
Exactly,
yeah. He was great in that.
Here's to the true author of the King Mutiny.
And you know what?
Fred McMurray. Right?
Yeah, Lee Marvin was in that, as well as Claude Akins. I mean, it had a slew of great tough guys in it. Thanks for bringing that one up.
Yes.
One of my all-time favorites. Our all-time favorites.
Yeah, he also played another pretty good war movie. It was called Go for Broke.
Right.
The one about the Japanese-American regiment.
Yep, that was
The one that
produced
fought in
by
Italy.
MGM also, 1951.
Well, they actually portrayed him as kind of a racist in that movie when he first started out. Of course, as the movie goes along, he kind of gains a respect for him,
Mm-hmm.
So that was pretty good, too.
Yep, it kind of reinforces that statement, war changes men. In that case, it changed him for the better.
Right,
in
exactly.
that film, yes.
And, yeah, I'm always kind of taken aback by, like, all these World War II references that kind of pop up in movies. Like, I'm kind of thinking of Contact and American Beauty. I was wondering if you remember those references.
Well, in American Beauty, the neighbor was, I guess I'm thinking of the Chris Cooper character, but...
Yeah, he had that plate.
Right.
He had that plate front that had the German insignia on the bottom of it.
Right. Yeah, Hitler's personal China, something.
Like that, yeah. And then in Contact...
Oh, where Hitler, the vision of Hitler.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The first TV images.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. Well, like you said, a cataclysmic event that is still reverberating today.
Well, it changed the whole geopolitical landscape of the world and made America the superpower it is today.
Yeah, sure did. And the cultural power it is, too.
Oh,
definitely.
For sure.
Okay, well, thanks for the call.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
Bye.
Good evening, you're on Take Two.
Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Hi.
Good. I just wanted to bring up a movie. My dad served in World War II and in New Guinea, and when he saw MASH, when it first came out, he said to me, Joe, that is World War II. And I think what he was saying to me is that just the chaos and the absurdity and, just the craziness of it all was what he experienced when he was in New Guinea and stuff. And I think that kind of transcends each and every war, unfortunately. It's always a result of chaos and absurdity.
Absolutely.
And I just real quickly just wanted to mention a couple movies.
Sure.
All Quiet on the Western Front.
Excellent.
Which is a classic. Coming Home, of course.
Oh, yeah. Great.
Which I think deals with, the ramifications of, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Pork Chop Hill's another great one.
Gregory Peck at his finest.
And a documentary, and I've brought this movie up before to you guys, but Hearts and Minds is a movie that everybody should see.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Hey, I love you guys.
Thanks. We love you too.
Right on, man. Have fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call.
Take care.
Thanks for bringing up Hearts and Minds.
Yeah.
Good film.
Good evening. You're on Take Two.
Hi, my name's Paul Hyman from Atascadero.
Hi, Paul.
Hey, and I want to underscore A Walk in the Sun. I thought maybe I was the only person who had ever seen that movie, and it was shaped my thinking, I think, as a young man in the 50s, and they seemed to run it on Saturday afternoon matinees, and the idea that the vulnerability and the story from the soldier's perspective of just kind of almost an anti-hero movie where there was confusion and I knew something was terribly wrong when that soldier kind of broke down and had to be taken away. And
right.
I'm just glad that that movie, A Walk in the Sun, that you kind of picked that out as a classic, because that shaped a lot of my views.
Well, thanks, Paul. You know, what's important about this film is it was made during the war. And this is what's kind of interesting, because it showed guys cracking up, guys afraid, guys wondering why they were there, a lot of confusion, a lot of hurry up and wait, a lot of not knowing what's going on over the next hedgerow.
Yeah, and I can't remember who the actor is, but he wants to know what's going on in the beach, and he finally crawls. He can't contain himself. He goes out, and then he gets strafed.
Yeah, that's Sterling Holloway.
Oh, my goodness.
Great character actor. And that's a great scene, because him and Dana Andrews are just sitting in a slit trench for what seems like an eternity, just trying to figure out what's going on, and nobody has any idea. Great film. And I would just want to say, All Quiet on the Western Front, Walk in the Sun, Pork Chop Hill, all directed by the same guy, Louis Milestone, one of the great American filmmakers.
Yeah, great movie. I'm glad you mentioned it. Thanks. You guys have a great show.
Oh,
Thank you
for the
so
call.
much.
Bye-bye.
Good evening. You're on Take Two.
Hi, this is Georgia from Napomo.
Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Bob.
Hi, Georgia.
Hi, Bob.
Wow.
I want to mention Emir Kusturicio's Underground.
Oh, yes.
Yes, I think that's an extremely important recent war movie that would be excellent for lots of people to see.
Now, that's the Yugoslavian film?
Yes, he's Romanian.
Oh, Romanian, but it takes place in Yugoslavia
I think
when
so.
the
He
Germans
goes all through
invade.
that area, right. But it's very much involved of the economic enslavement of the non-military people.
Ah,
is
that's
how I see it.
What's the title again, Georgia?
Underground.
Oh.
It's his films can be disturbing. They're hilarious if you once you get into it. But I found that one to be just jaw-dropping.
Oh, absolutely. What's amazing about that film, Georgia, is just even in the wake of all this oppression and destruction, that humanity still manages to break out. That one fellow who's always singing and drinking. Yeah, I can't remember his name. I won't even try to pronounce it, to be honest. I'll butcher it horribly. But there's a lot
of to practice Kucheritia.
There's a lot of great films that, like No Man's Land. That's a great war film that came out of the Bosnian conflict.
Won the Best Foreign Film Oscar last year.
Exactly.
Fascinating film about war.
Yeah, this is another great one. Pretty Village, Pretty Flame. That was another. Oh boy, that one is so disturbing.
Was
and
that the one on the Macedonian?
I believe that was about it was about the Bosnian War, and that is just it's so painful to watch. It's a great film, but boy, it's painful.
And Welcome to Sarajevo is a comment on the press coverage of the Bosnian War. It's a fascinating film.
Yeah,
Georgia, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Georgia.
Bye, Bob.
Bye.
Good evening. You're on Take Two.
Hello, this is Henry from Los Osos.
Hi there.
Yes, that Paths of Glory with Kirk Douglas is a great movie to see. Boy, I remember the first time I saw it. It was excellent. I'm thinking of another movie Toshiro Mifune and Lee Marvin did on an island.
Oh, Hell in the Pacific.
That was an excellent movie. And then what I couldn't remember, this one, it's not real great drama, but it was a war movie with Mickey Rooney and Wendell Corey.
Oh, was
and
that...
and Mickey Rooney's a gambler.
Was that the Bold and the Brave?
Well,
I think it was from 1956, maybe?
It's a black and white, too. Okay, Bold and the Brave. I'll have to look that one up.
That's
okay.
one of the last RKO radio pictures. In fact, the absolute last film released by RKO Radio Pictures was a adaptation of Norman Mailer's The Naked and the Dead with Aldo Ray and Joey Bishop and Cliff Robertson and Raymond Massey.
I'm going to have to look up that Bold and the Brave. Thank you for that information.
You're very welcome.
Good night.
Thanks for your call. Good evening. You're our last caller tonight on Take Two. Hi.
Hi. Hello?
Hi.
Oh, hi, I'm on.
Yes, you are.
Yeah. I don't know if this is qualifying for a war picture per se, but Judgment at Nuremberg, since you were talking about trials and all.
Oh, I think so. Absolutely.
Yeah, because it dealt with nothing but war. And also we had another choice we thought, From Here to Eternity.
Wow. You bet.
Yeah. And then this is another odd choice for a war picture, but it's a good one, South Pacific.
Yeah.
There is nothing like a day.
Nothing in the world.
Nothing in the world.
We'll stop.
Carry on, guys. Carry on. You've got a great show.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Well, Bob, we actually, we could have probably picked another 10 films to talk about on this subject.
Yeah, we could
and
have.
Giving interesting insight to the three-letter word that's on the minds of many people. And
absolutely.
And there were a whole list of others. I was glad that the caller mentioned MASH, because before the show we were talking a lot about MASH.
Oh, absolutely.
We're talking about Gallipoli. There's a ton more.
The Longest Day. I mean, just as a quick footnote, recently when Black Hawk Down was produced, how the Defense Department weighed in so heavily with equipment and men and whatnot. The last time I could ever remember the Defense Department weighing in that heavily was during the making of The Longest Day. Darryl F. Zanuck hired Peter Lawford to play Lord Cardigan, or whatever the heck his name was in this film, specifically because of his connections to the Kennedys. So he was Peter Lawford was able to get the ear of Jack Kennedy, who in turn was able to get the Defense Department to help out in the production of the film, which that's why I love movies.
I'd like to thank everyone for calling. Thank you for listening to the movie program on Public Radio KCBX, San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara Counties. Take Two, Bob Whiteford. I will see you next week.
Absolutely. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next week, next Monday, 6:30. Until then, take care.